Okay, in my previous video, somebody asked in the comments if I could talk about purple switches. So recently, Outemu and Kailh have both been, they both released a competitive switch to Zealio switches. So Zealios come in 62 grams, 65, 67, and 78 grams. And because they're so popular among the enthusiasts, it only makes sense that we should get some competition. So from Outemu and Kailh, we get their version of purple switches. So over here we have the Outemu Purple, and this is a 55 gram switch. The Outemu Ice Light Purple, this is a 62 gram switch, and this matches perfectly with the Zealio 62 gram in terms of weight. Then we have the Outemu Ice Dark Purple, which is 68 grams, which matches more or less with the Zealio 67, 68. I mean, 1 gram difference. I doubt many people are gonna be able to tell. I've spent some time trying to just feel these switches out, get my thoughts about them. I personally am not, my favorite switch is not a tactile switch. I either like linears or I like clickies, and I think tactile's my non-favorite middle ground between the two. But I'll talk about each of these. So the lightest among them all is the Kailh Purple at 50 grams. It has a nice tactile bump right at the very beginning of its travel. I would say you don't even get a full millimeter before you get the tactile bump. Maybe less than half a millimeter. And you get a nice sharp tactile bump right at the top. For that reason, this is a really nice switch, I think. 50 grams, if you're into lighter switches, this is a nice light 50 gram switch. It feels, in terms of weight, it doesn't really feel lighter than either the Zealio 62 or the Outemu Purple 55. 50 grams, I'd say these three feel about equal. And that tactile bump, I think, adds a little bit to that. I think it's a 55 gram spring, but really because you're fighting a very tactile bump, I think it feels a little heavier than the 50 grams that it's named for. So if you like a Zealio 62 gram, then this is a pretty decent switch. Then we have the Outemu Ice Light Purple, and this matches in terms of weight, matches perfectly with the Zealio 62 gram. If you listen, they sound about the same. The cool thing about the ice switches is that they have completely clear housings, just like the Zealios. But you can see that they have these pins on them that are not your normal solderable pins. They have these, although you can solder them, these are made for being hot swapped specifically. So if you get any of these Outemu sockets that they make, then you can just hot swap these switches out. So I'm actually a really big fan of these. I think they look so much nicer. If you're going to be dealing with any sort of board where you can see the pins and who's doing that, I don't know. I think these look a lot nicer. Then we get down to the Outemu Dark Purple 68, and then this one matches almost perfectly with the 67 in terms of weight. I would say the tactile bump on the Outemus is not particularly distinct, especially compared to the Kailh, where you get that bump right at the top, and it's very distinct and really quite nice. These ones have about a millimeter of travel, maybe a little more, before you really feel the bump. And the bump isn't really defined. It comes in a little soft, is there, and then disappears, I think, a little too soon, especially on the Outemu Purple. On the Ice Purple, on the 62 gram, it comes in a little sooner. Yeah, maybe after just a millimeter, and then has a nice defined bump. So this one, the purple, I wouldn't get just the Outemu Purple. I don't think it's a very nice bump. But the Ice Purple, that bump's a little nicer. Lasts for about 1.5 millimeters of travel, and then you get the rest of the travel. Maybe a millimeter of travel, and then 2 millimeters of just depress. And then on the Dark Purple, similar story. These probably have the exact same profile in terms of of the stem, or the plunger, and it comes down and it's just a little bit heavier. I think the weight tends to add a little bit to the feeling of tactility in these switches. So heavier switches tend to feel a little more tactile. I prefer really light switches. I think maybe that's why I don't love tactile switches, because you have to go really heavy in order for the tactile bump to usually feel good. But I guess that's maybe why I like the Kailh, because it's a little bit lighter and has a nice defined bump. But the Outemu Ice Dark Purple is also very nice. So the ice switches from Outemu, these are a good substitute. At least they have a nice bump. And then we go back to our standard Zeals, and similar story, we get close to about 1 millimeter of travel before the bump. You get a relatively long bump, I feel, in comparison to the Outemu Ice. So the bump lasts quite a bit longer, and then you get the rest of the travel. So these are pretty nice. I would say any of these 6 switches are really nice if you don't want to bottom out. You know exactly where when you've actuated the switch, and then you can just return. Yeah, and I would say the same thing for the Kailh. So the only other thing I think we should talk about before you decide on what switch is right for you, based on a video, is sort of the stem wobble. So the Zeals are made by Gateron, and the reason why people like Gateron switches over Cherry sometimes is that Cherry they're scratchy, and it's because their housing is a little bit tighter. Gateron, in order to make them feel smoother, has a slightly looser switch, which means you're going to get a little more keycap wobble. Like, I'm just wiggling a stem right now. You know, this wiggle is magnified once you put a keycap on it. So, manufactured by Gateron, these have a little bit of a wobble to them. All of the Zealios. I would say that the Outemu Ice are relatively tight in comparison. I would say these are quite tight, and they're not very scratchy. I would say they're comparable to the Zealios. Yeah, they're comparable. They're very close. They may be like the faintest bit scratchier, but I have not lubed any of these. So these are all stock from the factory as they are. So I think this is a fairly smooth switch with no lube, and if you lubed these would become really smooth. The Kailh is also just a little bit tighter, I think, than the Zealios. Yeah, just maybe they're a little comparable. I think they're effectively the same. But the Outemus are so tight, tight and smooth, which is really what you want in a switch. So I think my winner would be somewhere between the two Outemu Ice. If you're trying to decide on a switch and you put my feet to the fire, I would go with, because of my preference for lighter switches, I think I would go with the Outemu Ice Light Purple. 62 grams, a nice tactile bump, relatively smooth travel, and well defined, and you get the special pins. So I hope this is helpful. And if you like the video, make sure to give it the thumbs up and subscribe. If you dislike the video, please don't dislike, it hurts my feelings. I'm just kidding, do whatever you want. But thanks for watching.